Hello, I'm Nido Qubein. Welcome to Side by Side. My guest today is a global authority on one of the most desired values one can possess, trust. As the inventor of the Enterprise Trust Index, the director of the annual Trust Outlook study, and the author of the national bestseller, The Trust Edge, he's helped individuals, organizations, and governments on developing that value in their organization. We'll be talking about the importance of trust for us individually and organizationally with David Horsager.
Funding for Side by Side with Nido Qubein is made possible by...
Here's to those that rise and shine, to friendly faces doing more than their part, and to those who still enjoy the little things. You make it feel like home. Ashley Home Store. This is home.
The Bud Group is a company of everyday leaders making a difference by providing facility solutions through customized janitorial, landscape, and maintenance services.
Coca-Cola Consolidated is honored to make and serve 300 brands and flavors locally. Thanks to our teammates. We are Coca-Cola Consolidated, your local bottler.
David, welcome to Side by Side. I've heard you say that the lack of trust is the biggest expense a company can have. What do you mean by that?
I think it's the biggest expense an organization, an individual, or anybody can have, and it goes back to my grad work almost 2 decades ago. If you think of it, trust is always the leading indicator. So we kept seeing, it's not a leadership issue. The reason we follow a leader now is trust. It's not a sales issue. The reason people buy or not is trust. It's not a marketing issue. The only way to amplify a marketing message is trust. But when you look at costs, you think of, well, a good representation of a lack of trust might be a lock, right? The only reason I put a lock on something is because I don't trust you. So what's the cost? I've got to buy the lock. That's money. The biggest cost is time. Now I've got to open it. So without all the research I gave you, well, text someone you trust. How long does that take? Boop, done. Now write a text to someone you don't trust. How long does that take? How are they going to take this? How are they going to take that? The cost, it costs attrition, it costs retention, it costs engagement, it costs in every way. Whenever there's a lack of trust, there's always a cost, and it's the biggest, actually, that affects the bottom line.
So trust, not money, is the currency of business.
Always. Always. Trust is always the currency. It speeds things up. So if I trust you, I don't have to check up on you. If I don't trust you, I got to check up on you. Attrition goes down, attrition goes up, engagement goes down. It's always, trust affects if we see the kind of the swish of my original research was like everything good, when trust increased, everything good went up and everything bad went down. Cost, attrition, retention, and everything else.
You're known as the global trust expert because you've been at this for almost 2 decades. You've done extensive research. You've helped companies, individuals, governments, in fact. What would you say is your most unusual finding about trust?
Well, I think in one way it's more complex than people think. So we can think, oh, I know trust, that's just integrity, or that's just this, or that's just that. I think we do have to define it and see it for what it is, because like people will say to me, well, trust, that's just transparency. That's just vulnerability. And there's truth to be more transparent, but some of your kids are so transparent on social media, I don't trust them for a second, because confidentiality is also trusted. Or I can think, it takes a long time to build trust. Well, on 9/11, complete strangers trust each other in a moment, and they ran the same direction, if they're running the same direction. We can think, confidence is trusted. If that ever looks like arrogance, it's not. We can think, if I extend more trust to my team, I'll get more out of them until I get too much. So we have to think bigger about what it is and see it as the root cause. That's some of my newest writing, is because people either think trust is something you have or you don't, and it's actually something you can build every day, or it's doesn't really affect the root issue, and I believe it absolutely affects the root issue more than anything else.
And you publish annually an index on trust. What is that? Why do you do it? Who benefits from it?
So the Trust Outlook is our annual study, and I think it's the biggest trust and leadership study that comes out of North America. It's a global study. It's generally only, plus or minus 1.7, 1.8% margin of error. It's significant. So we're just looking at the trends of what's happening in trust as we watched, as you can imagine, the last couple decades, institutional trust dropped dramatically in especially in North America. But we're watching trends, we're seeing who's most trusted and why, those kind of things. That's the Trust Outlook, that's our annual study out of the Institute. The index, we also created, I think, some of the best ways to measure trust in organizations. So the Enterprise Trust Index is how we would go into a big university, a big organization, and show gaps of trust and close them. And then, of course, you're trying to affect sales, retention, or whatever.
So to have trust in an organization, you must first somehow define it, explain it, expect it, reward it. How does a leader do that?
Our definition out of the Institute, back to my grad work, trust is a confident belief in a person, a product, or an organization. And when I confidently believe in you, everything changes. So we start with that common definition, and then what happens? A whole lot of these great outcomes.
And how do you measure trust?
Well, it depends on we measure it against
is it behavioral, is it qualitative?
Okay. 8 traits. I mean, if you look at our big index, we're using my work with 30 years of Accenture data and benchmarking and everything, but it always comes down to 8 traits. 8 traits that came out of the research. So they're C words, but not for some motivational list, but these C words represent how trust is built. And they're comprehensive. I believe you can solve every organizational leadership issue against these 8. Doesn't mean I know how, doesn't mean I have some big ego about it, but it's always a function of these 8, and most are solving the wrong things.
What are they?
Yeah, quickly.
Yes.
So we trust the clear, and we mistrust or distrust the ambiguous or the overly complex. We trust the...
How does someone make a message, an announcement, a communication clear?
There's a whole lot of work to that. It depends. So I could say, as a manager, let's give a simple idea first. Simple idea. Manager, I remember when I was leading the first organization that I was younger than all of my staff. I wasn't getting what I wanted. I got absolutely clear, wrote it down, and I thought, it wasn't their fault, it was my fault. And from that time, I started going through this little ODC method, just in my head. ODC, not OCD. ODC. Was I clear about the outcome? What's the outcome?
What I expect.
Exactly. Paint the picture of the outcome. Not micromanaging, but what's the outcome? D, deadline. Many managers and leaders don't give a deadline because they're afraid it will create conflict, when not giving a deadline will almost ensure we have conflict. Because I say, I want to see that soon. I meant Friday, you meant next week. And it doesn't mean the end. You know, many of us leaders, we have something, it's ambiguous out here, but I can say, I'd like to see the progress in 6 weeks or whatever. C is clarifiers. Are you clear about this? Just feed that back to me. Are we clear about this? Just giving a little space for clarity. That little ODC model, it's one way that a manager can quickly use to say,
outcome, deadline, clarifiers.
Right.
That was clear. Number 1.
Clear.
What's number 2?
One idea under it. We spend a whole day or more on clarity, of course. But the second pillar is compassion. Turns out people trust those that care beyond themselves. It's hard for people to be committed to someone, to be accountable to someone, if they don't feel like that person, even if they don't care about them, if they don't have a care for a mission or something beyond themselves, or people beyond themselves. So the most, this will be interesting from the global study, the most trusted person in the world to the most people is not the Pope, not Oprah, it is
their mother.
Mother,
yes.
Absolutely. We trust mom because she cares beyond herself, she'll sacrifice, and we could learn something from mom. Third pillar.
Sure. So what is the difference between compassion and empathy?
Empathy is a part of how we show compassion. So empathy in the model of compassion, under each of these there are models. How do you build compassion? Turns out around the world, listening is a way we show compassion. Encouragement or appreciation is a way that we show compassion in the workplace. Being present, we call it the laws of compassion, LAWS. Listen, appreciate, wake up and be present, and serve selflessly. And empathy is a part of that. But there's ways like empathy that we show this pillar or live out this pillar.
Yeah. Excellent. So it's clear, it's compassion. The third pillar?
Third pillar is character. And of course, many of us thought, character, that's everything, as far as trust is concerned. I used to be an ethics professor, Character is important. You'll see from the next pillar, it's not everything, it's still critical. So we have a 7-step process for how you build character in an organization, but when I start with a leader, if we can start doing things as leaders, we start to, organizations don't change, individuals do. So I might just ask a few questions, 3 usually. For a leader, I would ask, 1, would you follow you under this character pillar? Would you? Would you buy from you? Number 2, I would ask, do you have decision-making values? Not just values in my family, faith, but do you have values you'll make every decision by? It's amazing what happens when a leader, even if people don't agree with those, if I know what that leader makes values decisions by. The third is there any way we are incentivizing against the character we say we want to have or have? People often buy into a false psychology that you got all the character you have at 12 years old. It's not true. You're moving toward or away from it by, if I talk about the work in East Africa, until we stop incentivizing bribery from police officers, why would they stop? Until we stop laughing at those jokes that increase, or sarcasm that increases some ism, why would it stop? That's incentivizing it. Or in my part of the world, a massive bank that I've got a lot of friends that work at, but they were incentivizing their sales team against the character they said they were going to have. It cost them billions later, but you're incentivizing in every organization and team toward or away from character every day.
So the word character, of course, is a word we throw around to mean a lot of things. How do you define character?
I define character putting together two things. Integrity, that's being the same in thoughts, words, and actions, and moral character. And that might take a little longer to define, but you have to put those together, because I've had people argue with me, well, if it's just integrity, Hitler had more of that than Churchill. Well, if you say just same in thoughts, words, and actions, remember Hitler, he got up at the same time. He wouldn't even drink coffee. You got Churchill kind of carousing and kind of inconsistent in certain ways, but he had the moral character to save really our world at the darkest hour of the 20th century. So you have to put this, to gain this thing we call the trust edge or be a trusted leader, you have to put integrity with a type of moral character that is beyond yourself.
Fourth pillar?
Fourth pillar is competency. This is why I would trust Dr. Qubein to take my kids to the ball game, character. I would trust him to, take my kids to the game because of compassion, but I wouldn't trust him to give me a root canal because of competency.
Yes.
You have to stay fresh, relevant, and capable in the area you want to be trusted. If you're leading the same way they were 20 years ago, I don't trust them. If they're selling the way they were 10 years ago, I don't trust them. You have to stay fresh and relevant and capable. Input still leads to output.
So the word trust is not therefore synonym for honesty.
No. It's a part of honesty. Of course, honesty is a part of character, but would you rather, let's say you're Jewish and you're being hidden in the basement and the Nazis come knocking on the door and the person that's hiding you, would you rather them be high character or honest? I would rather high character. I want to stay hidden, right? So some honesty is massively important to character, of course, and generally a sign of high character.
So you're showing us that trust is not just a simple word. It is an activated behavior that is based on what? Is it based on beliefs? Is it based on frame of reference? Is it based on upbringing?
Well, character, the great thing about trust is it can be learned, it can be built in a brand. We get to the last pillar. It can be built in an individual, but it can be good or bad. If we jump right to the last pillar, just as an explanation here, consistency, you're trusted for whatever you do consistently, right? So the only way to build a reputation, if you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late. If you treat my people this, if you say, some of these organizations we speak of, we could give lots of examples, but on an organization, the only way to build a brand is consistency. If I go to that bank and the teller was great, but the loan officer was like this, the paper stuff was like that, but the website was terrible, it was like, I don't trust it because it's all over. But I have to have a consistency of experience for the brand. It's not a logo, it's a consistency of experience in dealing with that, let's say, bank. Or if I go into a certain restaurant and everybody says my pleasure, wow, that consistency builds trust, right?
Yes. All right, so you gave us the first four and then the last one.
Yes.
Fill in the blanks.
Sure. Competency, commitment. We trust those that stay committed even in the face of adversity. If I feel like you're going to fall off here, if you think of anybody from history, from your life, your mom or dad or first grade teacher, or in history that's left a legacy, Mandela, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc, you're going to find somebody that was trusted because they were committed to something beyond themselves, maybe to death. They're trusted for that commitment. If I feel like you're just here for a little while, I don't going to trust you. But maybe one takeaway under this pillar in a very short time would be, how do you rebuild trust? How do you rebuild it? We have a 10-step process if you're a company with an oil spill. But whether you're a big company or you're an individual, there is only one way, and it is absolutely not the apology. You do not rebuild trust. Maybe, oh, I apologized. I said, I'm sorry. I'm not saying don't apologize. That can open up the communication. But we don't rebuild trust on the apology. The only way to rebuild trust? Make and keep a new commitment. We have people walking, I'm sorry I'm late. No, you're not. You're late every time. I don't trust your apology. If you apologize, but you make and keep a commitment, you have a chance, a new commitment. You have a chance.
If a company does something wrong,
Yeah.
and you're saying they shouldn't apologize, you should make a new
No,
commitment.
they should apologize, but they didn't rebuild. Many people think they apologized and then that rebuilt
Oh,
trust.
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
of course,
So the only
apologize.
way you can rebuild trust is to have another opportunity where you will deliver in a way that the other person appreciates.
They make and keep a new commitment. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean don't apologize.
So David, I've often made a distinction between making decisions and making commitments. See if I'm doing it right. See if you trust. See if you trust my definition.
By the way, one reason you don't trust people that say just trust me.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. But see if
of
you
course.
agree with me. That you make decisions with your brain. You make commitments with your heart. That's why commitments are harder to break. That's why commitments are longer lasting. Where am I wrong?
Well, I don't disagree, but I would make commitments with both. Head and heart. You could even think of it this way. People that you've heard the idea, love your neighbors yourself. You know someone who doesn't love themselves at all? How fun are they to be around? It's a problem. It's the same with commitments. If I'm a type of person that doesn't, whether as a promise mentally or with my heart, emotionally, if I don't make and keep commitments, who do I lose trust with first?
Yourself.
Myself.
Yes.
And you know what happens? Then I think, well, you're kind of like me. Oh, you're kind of like, you probably don't make and keep your commitment. All of a sudden, the team is poisoned by people that make and don't keep commitments because they don't trust themselves. Whether or not they make it more on head or heart, I don't know if it matters.
I see.
Yeah.
All right. So what's number 6?
Commitment, then we have connection. And really, some of the words that came out of this one were collaboration, the willingness to connect with others. There's some great research by the Myth of
What's the difference between connecting and communicating?
Well, you might not like this, but I will argue at the core it's never a communication issue. We never have a communication issue. So as an example, if I go through the pillars, I was a communication undergrad. Communication, of course it's a good thing, of course I know what people think, but many people say, oh, in our company, in our board of directors, we have a communication issue. Communication is happening all the time. Clear, if we go down the pillars, we can solve the real issue. Well, clear communication is trusted, unclear isn't. Compassionate communication, where I care about you, that's trusted. Hateful isn't. High character is, low character isn't, consistent is, inconsistent isn't. So if we can define it, then most people mean clarity. We can actually deal with the real issue and use a process to get to clear communication.
So it's connecting.
Yep.
So how must this person feel first? So this person will do what I want him to do.
Well, it can be, yeah. But some people, even if you use authoritative power and clearly communicate, that can work too. But the connection pillar is important because each of these pillars has counterforces in an organization. So if I look at an organization, under clarity, if I see ambiguity or complexity, we know we've got a counterforce. Under connection, if I see siloing, if I see the unwillingness to share resources for the betterment of all, we've got a problem with that connection pillar. And in fact, you don't have to put any more resources in. You can get, just by changing the willingness to connect and collaborate, an incredibly amplified output. Connection.
Number 7?
Number 7 is contribution. And what you really want to think about on this one is contributing results. So the first word out of this research funnel was results. You can't just have compassion. You can't just have character. You've got to contribute results. I can't go in, I'm going for amputation. Surgeon cuts off the wrong leg. I don't care how compassionate. We got a wrong result here, right?
Yes.
So we have to contribute results, and we look at this in 2 big ways in a company: individual contributors. How do I personally contribute? And then how do I motivate my team to contribute great results? But the way to think about outcomes, performance, that all falls under this pillar. And we've seen it before. This is why you have to have all 8. We've seen people just focus on results and they get them for a time. Without compassion or character, they lose everything. We see people just focus on, compassion and character and not ever deliver results. And that's not the work of work. You have to have all 8 to gain this thing we call the
So it's a formula, it's a recipe,
All 8,
it's
absolutely.
it's a system. What's 8 and 9?
So 8, just 8. There's just 8 of them.
Oh,
The
just
8th is consistency.
I see.
So, yep, we're done. If I was going to put a 9th, I might say courage, but that's not research-based.
So repeat all 8 again, please.
So we trust clarity. They have to be clear. Compassionate, those that care beyond themselves. Character, you know, we trust those that do what's right or what's easy. Competency, you're able to do it. The willingness to connect and collaborate. I think I skipped commitment. Committed, those you're committed for at least this time. And then we have connection, we have contribution, contributor of results, and finally, consistency. I trust
So
you.
how does this, so I understand how this works
Yeah.
in a company, for example.
Sure.
So a leader of a company wants to create trust in the organization, internally and externally with clients and customers. Let's talk about this from an individual's perspective. An individual who values trust, who wishes to have a life filled with trust and wishes to position themselves as a trustworthy person wherever they are.
Right.
How does that person understand that, create that, and actualize it?
I would learn about what they mean, each of these 8, how that can affect me personally. Trusted leader, I talk about that, how you can do that tomorrow morning, starting tomorrow morning. And we give away free assessments even for individuals so they could assess against the 8 pillars, and there's behaviors under each, so we can assess your behavior and see gaps. But if we didn't have time to talk about that. And I would just look at those 8 and I would talk to someone and say, let's start with clarity, because here's what we know. If you have a character issue, that's going to take a little longer. We can change something about clarity and see results in 2 weeks. And I'll give one little quick process here for clarity. Many people don't use, when they're thinking about how to take an idea to an action, the most powerful question that actually drives strategic clarity. There are actually 3 of them. And it's not the why. People think, oh, the why drives purpose. That's great. You got to have a why. Well, it's not the who. We love Jim Collins and having the right who's on the bus. The problem is these days I see a lot of fun who's singing kumbaya about their why right off the cliff because they're not asking this question. The question that takes an idea to an action, 3 of them. Ready? Number 1. Okay, how? More important. And this seems easy, it's not. How? And the most important question of all is, how? How, until I can do it today or tomorrow. That clarity gives hope. When I lost the 52 pounds in 5 months, it wasn't, a decade ago or whatever, it was like, I had to find a how. If someone says I can never have ice cream again, it's not going to happen. But I have to find hows that I will do, and they have to be something I can act on today or tomorrow. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? Until I, as an example, stopped drinking I wouldn't drink a calorie on a plane. Okay, that's a final how. I can see it, right? A final how always has a who, when, and where. So many people think co-leadership is great. Of course, we know the research shows it's terrible. Collaborative leadership is excellent. But if I have 2 people on a final task, I have 50% less chance of it ever getting done. Collaborate, have a person. So final task, if I think of a company we worked with, I said, what do you really want here? We want a better culture. Okay, how are you going to do that? Well, we're going to be more clear. How are you going to do that? We're going to communicate more. How are you going to do that? We're going to hold each other accountable. They're still nowhere until they have a how they can apply today or tomorrow. And when we get there, we have a chance.
So in a company, it'll be a clear vision, solid strategy. That's the how, right? The strategy.
Many people stop there. They
Yes.
stop at this strategy of, even if it's long term, which I agree with. In our clarity work, we start with MVP, mission, values, vision, priorities, and all this. But until we get people to think, okay, how am I going to do that today? How am I going to act that out today? If I don't have that, I don't have a clear how.
All right, so quickly tell me, in your work with any organization, profit, nonprofit, governmental, non-governmental,
Sure.
what has been or have been the 1 or 2 observations that you made that keep them from having a solid foundation of trust?
Well, a big challenge for organizations is something we all have, and that is atrophy is guaranteed without intentional action, consistent action. I remember I got a picture of a very good friend of mine. He was a bodybuilder, just muscular. Then he got hit head on by a Land Rover, squashed him in his vehicle. He woke up from a coma 5.5 weeks later. He actually lived without brain damage. It was a miracle story, but 66 days later, he was able to stand up for a few moments. I got a picture. In the same gym clothes he went into the action, same guy. But in 66 days, he lost 66 pounds. The problem with many people, they do something a little bit. They start it. They say something. We, in our culture work, we might start, we talk about ICE. Like, if we want to do what we do, I inspires people. You need that. You need a shift of thinking, you know. The C is clarify. We need a measure so we can close gaps. E, we need to equip them to ongoing do this. And the problem with any work is if we don't have a system to stop atrophy, because we have two problems, time and change, we have to continue to build trust. And we have to have a process. In the farm, I grew up on the farm, we say healthy things grow and sick things die, right? Healthy churches grow, sick ones become divided. Healthy marriages grow, sick ones become divorced. But they only are healthy if I put the right fertilizer, But I can't just do it now. I have to keep watering. So, consistency.
Consistency. Big subject, important subject, applies to all of us in every way. You have invested a lifetime in researching it and publishing material and speaking about it and counseling and coaching. We thank you for all that, David Horsager, and I'm delighted to have had you right here side by side with me today.
Funding for Side by Side with Nido Qubein is made possible by
Here's to those that rise and shine, to friendly faces doing more than their part, and to those who still enjoy the little things. You make it feel like home. Ashley Home Store. This is home.
The Bud Group is a company of everyday leaders making a difference by providing facility solutions through customized janitorial, landscape, and maintenance services.
Coca-Cola Consolidated is honored to make and serve 300 brands and flavors locally. Thanks to our teammates. We are Coca-Cola Consolidated, your local bottler.